Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of JohnnyVlogs. I'm your host, John Lorden. Hope you are all enjoying a wonderful holiday season so far. And before we get started on today's episode, I have to mention who it's brought to you by. And I don't know if I've mentioned her before, so I'm going to do it again just to be safe. Laura, thank you for joining Patreon and supporting my channel. I truly appreciate it. We also have Christina C., who actually made a pledge and then went back and increased it. Thank you so much, Christina. That just means a lot to me. And Yoli Viali. Hope I'm saying that right, Yoli. But thank you so much for your contributions to my channel. You guys know that because of your contributions to my channel, I'm able to do some pretty awesome things from my perspective in terms of making donations to certain families that are looking for their missing loved ones. I just wanted to let you all know that thank you to you, my Patreon supporters. This month, I will also be making a donation to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So thank you guys so much. So today's episode of JohnnyVlogs, what are we going to talk about? Well, it's a good question that was raised to me by a Twitter friend of mine named Marissa, and she was asking in particular about the killing season and what were my thoughts on their discoveries about law enforcement not working together. And don't worry, we're not going to go into more spoilers about the killing season, but I just wanted to note that they did hit a particularly strong point towards the end of their series about law enforcement and essentially how the data from all these different law enforcement agencies are kind of held in these silos. And if you have a criminal that is crossing those agency lines, it's very hard to identify their trend and other things that they might be doing. So I did look into this a little bit today, and it's a really interesting and tough conversation. First of all, know that here in the US we have about 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And from my understanding of it, there is no structure that helps to organize all of them or help them all operate in the same manner. Some of these agencies report directly into their own city systems. So looking at it in kind of a businessy perspective, you have 18,000 different operations happening there. And is it reasonable to believe that those 18,000 different operations are all operating in the same way? I sincerely doubt it. And what that leads to is you're probably having a variance in terms of best practices, like how to handle certain types of cases. You might have one agency that handles it completely different from another, and one agency might be able to solve those cases much more efficiently than the others because they have different processes. But then it raises this question of data, and how does that data get managed? So I looked into that a little bit, and I did find just doing some pretty quick and easy searches, I just looked for best law enforcement software, and I found an article that notes 156 different products for law enforcement software. And a lot of it is records management because you've got all this data that you have to record and keep somewhere and be able to run reports off of just for your little local reporting. But some of these products also do have specialized focus, like one of them might be specifically for keeping track of mugshots. However, just knowing that there's a funnel here if we look at this and try to solve this as a problem, all right? It's almost like a pyramid, right? You've got 18,000 different operations happening at the bottom. However, I would say most of them, if not all of them, are going to be filing their records electronically. Now, I might be incorrect about that, particularly for smaller departments in smaller towns and in more rural parts of the U.S. But on top of this funnel, we have the available software packages to manage records like that, and that's going to be a much narrower gap. So if there was some agency, and unfortunately I can't think of a place for this to be done other than at the federal level, it would have to be some type of federal information collecting mandate. But if there was some agency that said, look, we're going to make connectors for all these different types of software, and let's assume that let's say there's 1,000 products. You've got 1,000 products and hopefully 18,000 agencies that are using at least one or several of those products. If this top agency says we're going to make connectors for all these different types of products and then connect those into all those different agencies, it is perfectly reasonable to believe that someone can centralize all of those active records. Now, some of you might be shaking your head there going, John, this is already done. This is already done by the FBI with their NCIC system. Not quite. Let's read just a little bit about that. Although there are databases that compile criminal records, the most comprehensive of these, the one used by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, is actually a collection of multiple databases known as the National Crime Information Center, the NCIC. The NCIC holds 11.7 million records and averages 7.9 million transactions daily as of 2011. Unfortunately, the NCIC is also surprisingly incomplete, containing only 50 to 55% of all available criminal records in the US. And if you continue reading into this article, you'll actually learn that most of their major information sources are from courthouses. So these are crimes that have actually gone to trial and had some type of resolution, and that's when the record gets entered into this system. That is a very big gap for trying to address the problem that we were originally talking about from the killing season, which is active unsolved cases, cases where you might not even have a name to connect that. And that's where part of this challenge is. How do you tap into 18,000 separate silos of information to try to pull their active criminal investigations and then make that workable or searchable and reasonable to use? And I do believe that it can be handled. And if some of you out there are wondering, no, it's just too much work, it would never be complete, maybe, but you could capture a significant portion of it and maybe start identifying trends in there. Just look at what the NSA is doing and look at the resources of the NSA. You've got gigantic data centers, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of employees conducting data analysis, quite frankly on my records, your records, things on my PC. They get to use all kinds of very questionable tricks to maintain our national security. However, if you look at how they're using all that information, what are they doing with it? They have to collate it. They have to link it to other sources to make all of it make sense. And then they have to make reports out of that and searchability out of all that information. So look at them doing that for over 1 billion people, supposedly, and then consider 18,000 silos of information. I think it's perfectly reasonable. What's it going to take for that to happen? As I mentioned, I think it's a federal mandate. I don't see any other mechanism that's going to make that happen. Perhaps they could entice some of those agencies to start using specific software packages. Maybe if they gave them some kind of deal on, hey, we're integrating with these 10 particular products. If you guys use these 10 particular products, you'll be able to use them at half the cost of the software suites you're using now. I think there is ways to entice that to happen. And I do think it's very important that this does happen. Our country is made up of a lot of pocketed areas where there's different kind of mini cultures that are going on in this area, but it is extremely easy for people to get in a car and just take off to a different area. And they could be leaving a chain of crimes behind them that no one is detecting is the same person because they're hitting all of these different departments that are trying to research it. I think it kind of reminds me of, and think about this, how far back this thought goes. The Bat computer, right? I mean, even Batman in the 1960s, he had a computer he could go to, he could feed criteria into it. It didn't even have a monitor. It would simply spit out a piece of paper and give him a clue as to where he was going to go next. That type of system, it appears, does not exist. This article kind of puts it clearly, and I'll put a link to it in the description box below. This article starts by making the analogy of, hey, when you're watching a crime TV show and they say, hey, we need to run a background check on this person, and within a matter of minutes they have all their criminal history and a picture of them, of their recent driver's license and all that. They're totally making sense. That system does not exist, even for crimes that have gone through the whole judicial process, let alone crimes that are unsolved where you might not have that person's identity figured out yet. It is a bear. It's a big problem, and criminals, I believe, have exploited this. I do believe that, in particular, some of those murders that they were looking into in the killing season might be done by someone that is very aware of this. It could be that people are carrying evidence across these lines and dumping it in different places so that a different police department finds it, and that piece of evidence never gets linked back to its original case. It seems like a very big hole in our law enforcement data processing work. And I think that if it was filled, if there was some federal agency that was able to collate all that information, start running reports, identifying trends, and then kicking that back to the locals, to the local departments, saying, hey, we think you've got a guy here that's connected to 4 other cases that happened over in these other areas, I believe that would make the net much tighter and harder to get through for some of these criminals. And maybe they wouldn't even need a monitor. They could just have it spit out on a piece of paper like Adam West in the 1960s. What do you guys think? Tell me about it in the comments below. I'm very curious to see if you have any other ideas on how this type of thing can be addressed. You know, it's weird because in my IT career, a big portion of it was doing records management for legal departments within entertainment companies, and they generate a ton of information. And it is a bit of work to get people to centralize into a system, and you have to train all these different people to be able to use this one system. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but I do think if you move it up to that second level, like I'm talking about, let them use whatever software they want, but just make sure that you have a connector from that software that pumps that data up to a centralized agency where it could be flattened out, put into one database structure and reported on. You might be able to catch some additional criminals out there. At least that's my opinion. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me on this Johnny Vlogs, and thank you Marissa or Marisa, whichever way that's pronounced, for suggesting it. It's a really good topic. Take care, everyone, and I'll catch you on the next show on the Lord and Arts channel.